What's going on, guys? It's Steven from the BS Show, and the UFC just announced that Stipe Miocic will be having his trilogy fight against Daniel Cormier on August 15th. And to be honest with you guys, I feel like I should be a little more excited about this fight. Maybe it's because it's their third time matching up in a row, so I'm kind of a little fatigued on it. Or maybe it's because I know DC, win or lose, is going to retire after this fight. I don't know what it is. But what I do know is I'm a fool for not being as excited as I should for this fight, because these are two future Hall of Famers going up against each other, two legends. Stipe Miocic being the heavyweight GOAT, having the most heavyweight title defenses in UFC history, and Daniel Cormier winning two belts in two different divisions, the light heavyweight and the heavyweight division, and being the first to defend a belt in both divisions or two divisions. I mean, this is going to be an epic fight with two highly skilled fighters. I don't know what's wrong with me, guys. I really don't, but hopefully I get more and more into it the closer we get to the fight. But let's talk about this one. Let's just start off by looking at DC's last 10 fights. I mean, look at this, guys. Every fight was a championship fight except for that Anderson Silva fight, which was supposed to be a championship fight versus John Jones, but we all know what happened. John Jones popped for like his second, fourth, fifth time, whatever it was. But damn, does DC have a seriously impressive resume on his hands. But wait, there's more. Let's go back 10 more fights and look at that. Dan Henderson, everybody knows Dan Henderson. Dan and Uriah Faber are probably the two fighters in the UFC who have came the closest to winning the belt, but never actually became a champion. Let's go down the list a little more. Roy Nelson, big country himself. Everyone knows who Roy Nelson is. He fights in Bellator now, but that fight was definitely Battle of the Bellies, but DC gutted it out. Pun intended. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just on one tonight. And then next, we have Frank Mir. This fight was actually considered a test for DC at the time. As everybody knows, DC's a wrestler, and Frank Mir is a jiu-jitsu guy. He loves snapping limbs down there on the ground, so he was a scary matchup for DC. But obviously, DC did what DC does, and he completely dominated in the fight. And even farther down, we have Josh Barnett, another former champ. So to say that DC's resume is good would be a complete understatement. I mean, his resume is one of the best, up there with John Jones. But let's go ahead and look at Stipe's resume and see who he has under his belt. Alright, if we look at the bottom of this list, we see that Stipe's knocked out the KO walk-off king himself and Mark Hunt. Then moving up one, we see that he's also beaten the former champion himself, Andrei Arlovski. Then moving up one more, this is where he won the belt and started his title defense, beating Fabricio Verdum, who was on a tear at the time and might I add also popped for steroids. Then next we have Alistair Overeem and Stipe's first title defense. I even believe it was in Cleveland in his own home. So that's pretty awesome. Alistair Overeem actually ended up clipping Stipe in this fight. So Stipe had to weather the storm and show that championship will, which he did because he ended up knocking out Alistair Overeem. Then in Stipe's next fight, he had to avenge a loss that he had earlier on this list. He only has 2 losses on this list, and might I add, he avenged them both. So that says a lot about his character and overcoming opponents that he's once lost to. But yeah, he knocked out Junior Dos Santos when their first fight was really close and could have went either way. He ended up putting the nail in the coffin to that slight rivalry that they have. But next we have Francis Ngannou, which was also a scary fight, and many people, even myself, could see Francis Ngannou knocking out Stipe, and I'm sure these two are going to see each other again because Francis Ngannou's on a complete tear. And then finally, of course, we have DC. So let's talk about their first 2 fights. In the first one, DC caught Stipe in that close clinch range, knocking out Stipe, and many people thought that maybe Stipe was just suffering from the damage he took in the Francis Ngannou fight, because let's be real, Francis Ngannou was landing bombs and Stipe was just eating it and implementing his wrestling to keep Francis Ngannou guessing, and Stipe did a great job mixing the wrestling with the striking, and he ultimately dominated that fight. But he did take a lot of punishment and he was wearing it on his face. So there is a possibility that that could have impacted him in that first fight. But moving on to the rematch, I feel like DC had confidence in his knockout power at heavyweight after knocking out Stipe. And he went into that rematch with that mentality. And these two had an absolute slugfest. It was fun for the fans. It was so fun to watch and entertaining. But DC kind of shot himself in the foot, thinking that he was going to knock out Stipe once again. And while DC was going high, Stipe was going low, hurting DC's body. And ultimately, he accumulated dividends And those body shots started to hurt DC more and more until ultimately the fight ended. And this is why I think DC is going to win the trilogy fight, because I feel like he's learned his lesson from their second fight. And this time, I have no doubt in my mind he's going to use his wrestling, because he did not use it at all in their first two fights. He didn't need to in the first one. And the second one was kind of a slug match or slugfest. So this fight, especially if they're in a smaller cage like the fights have been, I feel like DC is going to win. I mean, I love Stipe and it's going to be a war, but DC knows he could stand with Stipe. He just knows he can't keep it standing with Stipe, and he's going to implement that takedown and maybe even open up some shots with the threat of the takedown when he is standing. So I just see DC coming out the victor and retiring with the heavyweight belt, where he started and where he's going to end his career. Storybook ending if I've ever heard of one. But yeah, that's my thought, guys, on this fight. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Who do you have winning this trilogy fight? I mean, this has been a great rivalry in the heavyweight division, and it's going to be fun to watch DC retire on his terms and on top, and possibly with the heavyweight belt. But yeah, that's it for this one, guys. Until next time, peace.